Welcome to the Sacred Reclamation Podcast. Here we will be exploring how we can reclaim the sacredness of birth, life, death, and all the happenings in between. My name is Sydney Sands, and my intention with this podcast is to reclaim the art of storytelling. This is a space where we will practice allowing the simple act of telling our stories and listening to the stories of others to be medicine for our bodies and spirits. I invite you to keep an open mind and an open heart as you listen to these stories. Grab a cup of tea, maybe a little snack, and settle in for story time. Hi friends, welcome back to the Sacred Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Sands. I just wanted to pop in and preface this episode by saying that this week the episode is going to be a little bit different. Steven's story is going to be divided into two parts. So we'll have this first part 1 hour and a half of his story, which was recorded back in October of 2024. Actually, it's the first episode I ever recorded, even before my solo episode. So that's really exciting, but we got disrupted by Hurricane Helene. You'll see if you're watching this on video. If you're just listening, you probably won't notice at all, but if you're watching this on YouTube, on video, or on Spotify, about 20 minutes in, the power goes out, and so the camera cuts off. And then we record for another hour or so, and then my battery dies on my computer, and there was no power because the storm was rolling in. And so we got cut off there, and that's where we left it. And then next week, part 2 of Steven's story will be when we recorded a few weeks ago in February of 2025. And I just find it, it was really divine timing. I find it really cool how everything unfolded and Steven got to tell his story in the most perfect way. Strange because we weren't expecting a hurricane to come in Eastern Tennessee and disrupt a podcast recording, but everything happens for a reason, right? All right, hope y'all enjoy the episode. Thanks so much for being here. Love you. Hi friends, today on the show I have my friend Steven Mañe. Steven and I have known each other for
7 years.
7 years? Yeah, 6 or 7 years. Steven is a good friend of my partner Shane. They went to school together. And so I met Steven probably shortly after I met Shane. And yeah, we've become good friends over the years, which has been really nice to connect together. And we've connected a lot through gardening. I feel like is our main source. And then that kind of just unfolds over time.
Yeah.
We keep unfolding and revealing more synchronicities and things we have in common or things we can talk about together for hours. Yeah, so I'm excited to have you. And also,
Thanks.
Steven is my first guest. This is the first podcast we're recording. So
cool. And I've never been on one ever, so this is just full of firsts.
First time for everything. But we'll start with a little mini guided meditation just to get into the body and so that we can, have an embodied conversation. If you want to close down your eyes, and I'm going to join in too and kind of drop in too, although I'll be leaving as well. And for anyone listening, if you'd like to drop in, if you're not driving or doing something that needs your focus and attention, and just close down your eyes and start to notice your breath first without changing. And just feel if you can land on a descriptor word, if your breath feels shallow or deep and expansive or quick. And just notice where you are right now. And when you're ready, begin to deepen your breath, taking deeper inhales through your nose and deep exhale out through your nose or your mouth. Deep inhale and out. Continuing with your breath throughout this meditation. Begin to bring your awareness to your crown, to the top of your head, your scalp. And maybe imagine some sort of warm light. I get this kind of deep reddish orange color, almost a color of like a red clay, a red earth, but it's glowing in light form. Just begin, whatever color your light is, to scan down your body, starting at the top of your head, scanning down your forehead, your eyes, your nose, your jaw, your neck, scanning down your shoulders and your upper back, your arms, your elbows, your chest, your ribs, your side body, your lower back, scanning down the pelvis, your glutes, your thighs, down your knees, your calves, your ankles, the tops and bottoms of your feet and your toes. And when you breathe in, breathe all the way back to the top of your crown with a deep inhale, maybe the biggest breath you've taken all day. And as you exhale, allow that light to cascade back down your body. And continue on with this for a little while, scanning your body, maybe spending a little bit more time in places where you have tension, and kind of allowing that light to warm up and soften those places. Or maybe you spend a little bit more time somewhere in your body that feels good, somewhere where you can access a little piece of pleasure and just allow yourself to sit there for a moment with this warm light. Remember to continue with your breath, allowing this light and your breath to synchronize and work together in this little body scan. And when you're ready, start to come back. Maybe you flutter open your eyes and look around your space, reorienting yourself to the room you're in or the car you're in, whatever space you're in. Coming back to this present moment. And hopefully you weren't in a car doing that meditation, because I totally said that before. But maybe you're just sitting in a park spot.
I'm sorry, that did it for me.
There's going to be a lot of laughter in this, I think.
I'm just thinking about how many times I've done some shit while I was driving, and I really shouldn't.
Hi. All right. Do you feel like we've landed between your offering before we recorded and now?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and we've spent the whole day together, so.
Been a whole day of warming up.
Yeah. So now I'd like to, just before we start, just take a moment and set our intentions for this time together. And I would say, I think that my intention with this podcast in general, but also with this specific episode, my time with you, I think my intention really be in presence with your stories and be available for receiving the medicine that I know is going to come from your stories in this conversation, and also to be in presence so that whatever wants to or needs to come through, like allowing myself to be a vessel for that to come through and to serve the highest good of all. That would be my intention. What about you?
I was hoping you wouldn't actually ask.
Well, I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah, I suppose my intention is to similarly act as a vessel, but so that I can embody and deliver whatever stories serve you and your audience most, and the beings that were involved in those stories, and that I can effectively communicate and efficiently the impact of those stories and the beings involved in them in such a way that it can be received.
Yeah. All right. Our intentions have been set. I love it.
I'll just pretend that we're picking chestnuts and we're across the yard from each other.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
It was.
I can't even tell you, like, literally, that is like one of my favorite things to do, is just like go harvest shit from the forest, particularly nuts, like acorns, now chestnuts.
Well, once I have like a big garden, I'll invite you down like for harvest time, and you can come stay when it's time to harvest and process.
I'm so down.
And it's on recording. We got this on solidified.
Okay, cool.
So, tell us all a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from. Where I would say where you are, but we're doing this in person, so you're obviously here. So tell us who you are, where you're from, where you grew up. Yeah, just a little background.
Okay.
And maybe like what you do.
Okay. What I do as in...
However you want to answer that.
Gosh.
Who you be.
Who I be. Okay.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy. What an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, my name's Steven, as you well know. I'm from Florida. My family is, we are descendants of pretty much immigrants all around. My mom's side comes from Northern Europe, so Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Germany, and they initially came to the Appalachia, the Blue Ridge, over by, I think it's Ohio and Chesapeake or Delaware, something like that. I'm not good with U.S. geography unless it's the Southeast. And then my dad's side is we're Hispanic, so his dad's from Cuba, my grandfather's from Cuba, my grandmother is from Puerto Rico. And so our ancestry is both Spanish and Portuguese and French in terms of European ancestry. And then, of course, indigenous people from the Caribbean being the Taínos from both Cuba and Puerto Rico. And then West Africa, obviously from the Atlantic slave trade. Lovely things. But anyway, so yeah, that's me and my family. And yeah, I mean, I don't really know. What was the rest of the question?
I think that's enough for now.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And you currently live in
Florida, yeah.
Florida.
Central Florida.
And right now we are in eastern Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous out here. We spent the whole day outside together, wandering around. Yeah, so I think that sets the setting for... And we know each other from Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been up here how long again? A year?
Not even. I got here in March, and it's September. 6 months?
Yeah, about. Something like that.
Wow, a lot happens in 6 months.
3 to 9, yeah, that's 6.
Yeah, 6 months. Been loving it so far.
Well, welcome up here.
Thank
Not
you.
that I have any right to give you welcome, but...
The people here are very welcoming, I will say that. The people and the land.
Mm-hmm.
Shane and I have both felt very welcomed, which is a good feeling when you move somewhere new.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the land, I just want to take a second to recognize the Cherokee, considering we're kind of in the Cherokee National Forest and everything, and
yeah,
they were on this land, so I just want to, because we spoke about it. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to...
Thank you. Yeah, I love that you brought that in. Okay, so let's dive in now that we know who you be a little bit, and we'll get to know who you be a little bit more throughout this, hour or two. So I guess to start, it's a similar question to the one I just asked, but tell us what we need to know about maybe the past, whether that's like where you grew up or things that have happened previously, like set a foundation for us to know who you are and what you've been through that has like before we jump into your reclamation story.
Okay.
So you know what I mean? Just set the scene for us a little bit.
Yeah.
Before we just dive right in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So growing up, I was always like super shy. I mean, I was hide under the table shy, always kept to myself sort of person. Like, don't really know why, but what I do know is that animals and plants always came naturally to me. I've always viewed both as family entirely. There's this tree in my backyard, an oak tree, and I've always called her home tree. And when I was little, like any time that I had to get something out of my head, or I was wondering about something, or it's a very curious child, like very curious and very observant. And I always knew how to entertain myself. But I would go and visit her and just sit under her and just, I don't know, whatever. But to what I said a second ago, my mom always tells this story how when I was little, you could just leave me in the corner. I was very quiet. I just would watch from like the
stroller. The
stroller. I was gonna say roller. The stroller. Missing 2 letters there. The stroller. I would just like look up at everybody and just watch. Like I wasn't a crier, but I also never slept. I would just be awake the whole night, but just quiet and just be watching. And she tells me how it always used to drive her nuts because she would be like, "Will you just sleep already?" Because she didn't know if something was wrong or like whatever. But I was just sitting there chilling, just just awake all the time and just watching. And as I got older, like I said, like you could just set me in a corner, or better yet, just, adults would be talking and I would go sit in the grass and I'd just be playing with two little pieces of grass or something like that. Or I would always just stare at things and just watch them and just wonder and just look. And so anyway, that kind of gives you an idea of like my mindset growing up. Like I still very much am that way. I'm much more expressive. I had to work at being as social as I am. Like it was a long, arduous process of like 3-hour panic attacks and stuff like that. Like it was a process. But so I'd like to think I came quite a way. But learning people was a different kind of animal for me. Not to say that I've completely learned them or I ever will, but in terms of, that there was this period in my life, like right before middle school, where something in me like lost that or lost touch with it. And I just fell into this horrible depression.
Lost touch with like the plants and the animals and the observing.
Exactly. Okay. Like it just, I got wrapped up in school and middle school and puberty and all those gross things that everybody loves, and it was horrible. And then 8th grade came around and we had world history or something, or world religions or something, and I learned about Buddha, and the teachings of Buddhism and everything really like just hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I feel like I'm talking to myself right now, like the stuff that was in it. And the other stuff was also like, how does somebody arrive at that? And so I was frantically looking, how did this happen to him, between the Enlightenment and everything, like what was that for him? And that's how I found meditation. And so 8th grade, my dad had learned TM meditation, and he taught me how to do that in our laundry room.
Is that transcendental meditation?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, he taught me. I mean, it was his bootleg version, 30 years from the last time he did it. So, but it was close enough. It got the point across,
Yeah.
But so he taught me in our laundry room because it was the darkest room in the house. So we took 2 chairs and we sat around the laundry baskets, and the laundry machine and the dryer were going on in front of us. And he walked me through it. And it was so funny. I can still remember the feeling. And it was just like, wow, I'm home. It was just like, holy shit, like this is that thing, like it's in there. I just got to fish it out, got to do some stuff to get it to the surface. And anyway, so then I just went on this huge thing, and I found meditation and Buddhism evolved out of yoga and blah, 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 blah. And it all came very naturally in terms of that. Because I always looked at Western culture and modern culture and society, and I always felt like an alien. And I think maybe that's part of where my thing with people was, is like I was in this place where nothing made sense to me. Like, why are people doing these things and operating like this? Like, I didn't understand the competitiveness in sports. I didn't not that has anything to do with yoga or culture or anything, but I didn't understand
American culture, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big thing, and I mean, I never understood the separation with nature and everything, and being indoors all day. It just, all this stuff didn't make sense to me. And wearing shoes, like, why would I want to wear clothes? Like, so when I found Eastern culture, I really took to it. And then later down the line, I found, other cultures, particularly cultures indigenous to different areas, Africa and Turtle Island and the Western Hemisphere and even Europe. But like I'm talking about like those ancient, deep-rooted, very earthly, like Mother Nature type cultures, you know. And it was like, wow. Like I didn't feel like an alien anymore. I was like, oh my gosh, like this makes sense to me. I don't feel so weird. There is somebody out there. In fact, there were whole civilizations that thought this way and felt this way. You know, it was another kind of homecoming. You know, of course, then there's the whole journey of finding people living who feel that way, and you know, whatever. But
how old are you when you started going down that?
Yeah, this was all like it started 8th grade and then went from there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean 8th grade through high school, really, but probably by like freshman year and sophomore year, like it was kind of rooted into me. That I actually continued with that depression until sophomore year, and then I tried doing things that nobody should try doing, and luckily it didn't succeed, and I had a realization, like, what am I doing to myself? Like, I was like, it just dawned on me, like, life is so beautiful, and I'm trying to take myself away from it. Like, and just my whole framework switched. And at that point, I was drinking all the time. Like, I had been, I guess, quote unquote, an alcoholic since pretty much freshman year. I mean, I found this thing in me in 8th grade, and I yearned for it so much. And then I came into weed and alcohol and stuff, and I thought it was like this fast pass to it. But the more that I did those things, the further away it felt.
Yeah.
And it just drove that suffering inside of me. And so 10th grade, after that happened, I resolved to fix it and stop it. And so I stopped drinking, and I didn't stop smoking like cold turkey, like that still took some years after, but I threw myself into yoga, and I started meditating hours and hours and hours. I was like, I have to figure this out and like get this. I mean, I would just come home from school and just go and meditate. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd meditate. And I made this mala and I carried it around with me. And at lunchtime, I was meditating. In between my classes, I was meditating. I would take bathroom breaks and just go somewhere and meditate. And by junior year, I was no longer depressed. And I had no panic attacks or anything. And it was like I finally felt free of it. And it wasn't something that I had to work on anymore. But I mean, like I said, I drilled it. I mean, I was desperate. I was like, I cannot continue this way.
Yeah.
You know, I was gone from school. Shane could probably tell you, for like a week or two or something. And there were all sorts of rumors floating around about what had happened. This was completely unrelated to this. The reason that they told me to go home and take time off is because I walked into all of my classes and I refused to speak. And I sat on the floor in every single one of my classes. And I didn't take. This was sophomore year.
When you were still in your like self-destruction mode, or were you in your meditation mode?
I was in self-destruction mode, but I was crying out for something and I didn't know. I just knew like the way that this culture is operating, it's not good for people. Like, you know, I have all these friends that are suffering too and going through these things, and these people who are slaving away for they don't even know what, and like, and then this stuff is happening in me to an extreme degree.
Yeah.
And I was like, something is not right here. Something has to change. But I'm a helpless high schooler and nobody listens to a kid. So whatever. So finally I was like, okay, nobody's listening to me, and evidently I don't know what to say or how to say it. So I'm just going to shut my mouth. And I started doing vows of silence at that point.
And that was why you got sent home from school?
Yeah. and they made me go home, and I didn't come back for like a week or something. And people literally thought that I went to like an institution or something. But so yeah, they sent me home, and I was, yeah, I think it was a week. It was 1 or 2 weeks, probably 1 week, and I tried to push it to 2 weeks, but they wouldn't let me. I don't know.
They
But
being like the
school and
or
whatever, and also my parents were kind of like, okay, like. But so anyway, what happened that week was I stayed home and I pretty much turned myself into a monk. That week where literally everyone was making up crazy shit about me. I mean, when I came back, the looks that I got and whatnot, and what my friends told me people were saying, I mean, I was like, yo, what? I was literally just meditating the whole time. Just a vow of silence, just whatever, doing my own thing. Like literally, I was just like healing myself that week. I didn't get institutional. I didn't see a single doctor or therapist or anything. Like I was just like, this is not an option for me to live this way anymore. And if nobody else is going to do anything about it, then I have to figure out what I need to do about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And, I didn't fix it, and, at that point, but it at least got me to a point where I could tolerate going back. It was that I was so upset by the whole thing, not just what was going on inside of me, but how everything was being handled, or better, how it wasn't being handled, that I had to learn how to come to terms with that and realize I need to operate in a world that, isn't what I think, what utopian idea I have for what the world should be,
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's just a simple fact of life, but, being somebody who felt so alien all the time, and then realizing, like coming back to what people might call your inner child or whatever, like this thing that was alive and vibrant in my childhood, like reawakened in me. And I'm like sitting here realizing like how it was like amputated from me by the culture.
Yeah.
Was just, I mean, it literally felt like trying to reattach a limb that somebody had cut off. I mean, I've never been through that, like, but it's like, that's emotionally, how I would describe it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's when I went on, and that whole summer after school, I was just, I mean, I went to my yoga studio, and I would just, my parents, God bless them, I mean, they are phenomenal. I mean, they knew that that yoga was the thing that like fed and was healing me. And they got me a membership to the yoga studio that I was going to. And my dad, he, it's funny, as a father, he always felt very like hard and stern and stubborn, but his heart was like always there. Whenever shit really hit the fan, he was right there. And like, he found this amazing yoga studio for me and this wonderful community. And I literally spent that whole summer there. And when I wasn't there, I was at home just meditating and doing whatever I could. And I went vegetarian. I did all these things and blah, blah, blah. And, I just knew, I was like, this is it for me. Like, this is what I need from life,
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't get enough of it,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Can I pause and just backtrack just a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
So I feel like it's worth just spending a little bit more time on, like, I don't know, the darkness that you went through as a young teenager, a young teen. Because it was, you're saying middle school through sophomore year was like really rough for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what age, like 11, 12 to like 15. Is that right?
Yeah, it must have been. I would say at least through 16, because my birthday's in November. So you're 15, you turn 15 freshman year, 16 sophomore year, so 16. And then, yeah, probably like 11 or 12. But honestly, the first time that I started feeling like depressed and stuff, first time I knew what that feeling was honestly probably like third grade. When like I really like felt something of that. But then I would say blossomed, but I'm going to say wilted into this worse thing.
Yeah.
Sixth grade. And then by the time eighth grade, ninth grade, and 10th grade hit, it was just like full-fledged. Just.
Yeah. Some of the most special people that I know in my life have known that they were different and were experiencing like big, almost like, I'm doing quotes, but like adult-sized emotions as a child.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, like, there's a couple people that come to mind that I'm thinking of, and they're not alive anymore because they took their lives. Because it was, from what I'm hearing you say, like, it is the experience of too much and I don't belong here and this world isn't made for me, or this world is like fucked up.
Yeah.
And they didn't find, their healing balm.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important for you to be sharing that part of your story, because I do think even now there's a ton of people who have been through that during that age, and then there's also a lot of kids that are going through that now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't necessarily have any answers besides this stupid cliche of like, keep going, it gets better. Because I do think that's true. And I also think sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and sometimes it gets worse and then it gets better and then it gets worse and then it gets better.
Yeah.
But I just want to like slow down a little bit on that part of your story, because I do think it is really important. And it's also like how you were describing that no one listens to a kid, and you also didn't have the language to speak what you were going through. Yeah. I think that is probably extremely relatable. And so I just wonder, like, with the school and with your parents and all this going on, were people around you aware of what you were going through with the depression and the anxiety and the drinking too much? I guess a kid that age shouldn't be drinking at all. So yeah. Anything is too much. I've heard a lot of stories and my own story of like drinking at a young age. But yeah, it is funny to think like, oh yeah, no 13-year-old should be drinking at all.
Yeah.
But were people aware of that, or was that like was that 100% internal experience? Like, was the school just sending you home because they're like, he's being weird and he won't talk? Or were they aware, and was your family aware of like what was going on?
My family knew. I don't think they could not have known. But we did discuss it. Because, well, with the drinking, nobody knew. I mean, when I finally told my parents years after the fact, they were both dumbfounded. I mean, we were talking about, the liquor cabinet earlier. I won't say that here, but I mean, yeah, they had no idea. It's still a sore spot because, I can't even fathom the pain a parent must go through. I mean, finding out that your child was going through all these things and you had no idea. Or even if you had an idea, not knowing the depth of it. I mean, that alone, knowing that your child is in pain and suffering is burdensome, as it is. But, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't share it, is because, if people knew the depth of it and they actually cared, which I didn't know or feel that anybody did, even though looking back from all the things, especially what my parents did for me, I know that the relationship I have with them now is something I can't even begin to describe the immense love and appreciation for them that I feel. The kind of stones that they were for me to hold on to at that time. I mean, I was a devil to them. I mean, I was wicked. I mean, I was really, really wicked to them, the things that I did and that I said, and it wrenches my heart even now thinking about it. And that they endured through all of that, just hoping that I would get through it. I mean, just the space that they held and literally everything they did to open up these opportunities while I was just hurling wickedness at them. I mean, and taking everything they did for granted at the time. I mean, most people, I feel like would have been out the house or something, or like off to military school, or I don't know what other people would have done, but to have the parents I did that literally held on for dear life, hoping that I would get through that. I mean, I say, oh, I turned myself into a monk and everything, but if I didn't have them to do that for me, even when I didn't know or recognize or want to know or recognize them for it and everything that they did, I don't know that I would have done that myself. Everything that I did for myself, I don't know that I would have come through and done it if I didn't have them there holding that space for me.
Yeah.
They were just holding on to it as best as they could, because here I am, I feel like an alien because this culture, this society, and everything doesn't make sense to me. And here they are with a child who operates in a completely different from anything that they know, because this is the culture and society and everything that they operate from and they know. And here they are trying to feed me whatever they can find that feeds, that nourishes that thing in me. Even if it goes against everything that they can conceive and everything that they believe, I mean, I don't know the extent of everything that they went through for me, but what I do know is that they probably moved heaven and earth to make it happen, whatever it was. I mean, and and that's why, like, as somebody who would like to have children in the future and a wife and whatever, like, I take having a child very seriously, because that kind of commitment and devotion to them is, I don't want to offer them anything less than that, no matter what they go through. And to try and mold myself into a person that can be capable of doing that when I do have my own kids, if I have them, if I'm blessed with that, then, or just to be able to hold that space for anybody. Like, that's really a lot about what I do with myself now and the directions that I take myself in now. But yeah, sorry, I totally tangented. What was the original question?
That was a good tangent, I feel like. And I feel like that's so special that you have parents like that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times, and obviously I can't speak to anything your parents were feeling, but I feel like a lot of times people get so overwhelmed when they have a child that's going through a hard time like that. And like you said, they kick their kid out of the house, or they send their kid away to military school or boarding school or rehab, or they just offload it onto something or someone else because they just can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So for your parents to like be able to be with it and like be in the discomfort and continue holding it and holding you, I mean, that sounds like that is like life-giving. That is what saved you in a way, along with your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And finding meditation and Buddha and yoga. And that's my little interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was everything combined, because ultimately, regardless of what happened outside of me, the journey had to happen within me. The process, the healing and everything.
Yeah.
But I cannot understate the value of having an environment where you are allowed to do that. I mean, that's the whole purpose of temples and ashrams and everything, is to create an environment that's conducive to that transformation. And the devotion that my parents had created that energy and that space that I had no idea was even there, but it did this thing for me that allowed me to look at that. But the thing is, I still had to look. They could have done all of that and it would have been for naught if I hadn't actually done the work.
Yeah.
If it would have gone to waste.
Yeah.
Everything that they did, if I had not made it worth it, And then, that comes into like what we were talking about the other day, and how I feel like it doesn't matter what direction I take my life. I choose a direction, but no matter the direction, it matters that I do it in such a way that it honors all those that came before me and all those that come after. And that I do it to the best of my ability. Because if I don't, then what am I doing it for?
Yeah.
And not that I do that all the time, but that at the very least I'm working towards it and aspiring to that, actively, So, yeah, but I mean, so it's funny because after that, because of this whole thing, senior year, I ended up I moved schools after sophomore year. I switched schools. I was at a private school, very small school. So even if you want to change, nobody will let you because they all know who you are.
Yeah.
Or at least they've decided who you are,
Well, I just want to say, like, briefly, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but Shane has always told me that, like, he has memories of you just getting up in the middle of class or just sitting in the back of the classroom and meditating. And he has this memory of like going over to you and being like, "What are you doing?" And
I remember this.
Do you want to
day,
tell
him
the
and
story
Chris
then?
came up. Oh God, I vaguely remember it. But I just remember, and and it was funny because I was always a floater. So my parents told me this about like our parent-teacher conferences and everything, and it's funny because hearing what other people have to say, and that's why I asked you earlier, like, hey, how do you perceive me or whatever? It's because growing up, I had a completely different idea of what people thought of me than what they actually did. That I found out later because people would tell me, "Oh, I remember you were blah, blah, blah." I wouldn't ask them, right? They would just offer the information, and I'd be like, "Sorry, what?" Like that is not what I thought was happening,
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I was a floater, so I would visit each of the groups at lunch, each of the lunch table groups, the cliques, the whatever, and just kind of because I didn't fit anywhere, I was like, I might as well dabble in everything, you know? And for the most part, I was largely welcomed. There was some bullying here and there, but mostly it was like, there was that one kid who was like, oh, they just got problems, you know, like, you know, like, okay, like that's just what they do. Like, all right, you know, but not that that's how I perceived it, but, you know, looking back on it, it's a completely different perspective, you know, going through it, it was God awful.
Yeah.
But I always gravitated towards like the outliers, towards the kids, you know, who sat by themselves, or you know, the outcasts or whatever. That's where I thrived. I was like, these people are just as weird as me, maybe not in the same way, but
yeah,
I catch their vibe, you know?
Yeah. But it was an extremely small school, wasn't it?
It was, so there weren't many.
Yeah.
But once you made your way out there, you pretty much stayed out there. Unless puberty did you wonders and you became, you know, like, you know, golden in that way, you know, like you were
yeah.
you know, but that's just kind of how it goes. It's one of those unfortunate things, I think, particularly of this society that we see. But anyway, yeah, Shane and his group of friends, there were maybe 2 or 3 of them that really whatever, but him and Chris in particular, don't know if he'll mind me mentioning his name, but they had a certain openness towards me that I really noticed. I don't know that they know that, but I really know that anybody who came to me or looked at me with a certain openness and whatever, like I was, like I said, when I was little, I was an observer.
Yeah.
I watched everybody. I paid attention to everything. And it was always very genuine from them. They were always just really curious. And so that day when he came up to me and he was like, hey, like, what are you doing? And I don't even remember what I said. I think I was telling them the method that I was using, which is okay. I won't give a method here because alone it can be very imbalanced and cause certain things to worsen. And I don't want anybody to try it and then end up.
Can I just say what I remember from the story?
Yeah.
Of what he's always told me is that you I think maybe you said you were meditating and then he was like, oh, what's that, or how do you do that?
Yes.
And you had told him like, listen to your heartbeat.
Yes, that's literally, wow, you did hear the story.
Yeah, I think I've heard it multiple times, but yeah, that story stands out to me. And then he just was, I think it sounds like he was kind of just magnetized by you. He thought that was very, like, for lack of a better word, cool, that you were sitting in, you know, school meditating and like pissing the teachers off by doing it, you know.
Oh, what a rebel.
The sacred rebel.
Yeah. No, that was the method. So now that we've said the method, I have to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watching any bodily process is a fantastic way to start. It will draw you in very quickly. For somebody who either has heart problems or anxiety, I would caution them as to using that method.
Because that could induce more panic.
Exactly. Especially if you don't listen in the right way, where you're simply listening and you just let the mind do whatever the fuck it wants. And if you attach some meaning to it and you identify with what's happening and you start creating these ideas about it, it doesn't matter if your mind has ideas about what's happening, as long as you just let it run. It's like your heart beating, your lungs breathing, they work anyway. They're not supposed to stop or you drop dead. Your mind's supposed to go. Let it do that. Most people with a method like that, especially when they have some trouble around it, it's not a good starting point because it can escalate that. And so that's why I caution people to use that method. Although it's highly effective, there's a right way.
Yeah.
It like you might make great progress with it, but it may come with a consequence as well. And then you're going back and forth, and then you end up nowhere. So that's why that I learned a lot. I did a lot of things that worked really well, and I did a lot of things that worked really well for one thing, but did a real bad number on some other things. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I learned came from trial and error, and one of the reasons why I always tell people, okay, find a guru, follow a tradition, do something, blah, 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 but don't do it haphazard, is because there were a lot of consequences that I faced from a lot of the things I did. Even though I rapidly healed my depression and anxiety, it came with other things. And I might have healed it quicker had I followed a protocol.
Yeah.
With certain things. There were eventually I did get to a tradition and I followed protocol and I left all that behind. But until I found that, it was very tumultuous, and especially when you're going so deeply into that.
Yeah. And at such a young age, I'm sure.
Exactly, with no guidance, nobody to tell you, okay, if this happens, this is what you need to do. This is how to handle it. Okay, if this happens, yada, yada, yada. So the heartbeat method, like I said, phenomenal method, very powerful. But a hammer is powerful. It'll break something.
Yeah.
A drill, that's a terrible analogy, but
not everything is for everyone.
Exactly. Like you have to find a method that's either applicable to everybody or applicable to you. But don't just go and pick any method.
I also think that it's kind of just a barrier in general with meditation of what you were talking about with the mind. Like, it's not the fact that the mind is going, it's what the layer you're adding on top of that, because it's like you have this idea of what meditating is or what it's supposed to be, and then if you're somewhat of a perfectionist, like I wouldn't label myself as a perfectionist now, I'm a recovering perfectionist. But I could be someone who sits down to meditate and then I'm just like, I'm not doing it right. I don't know how to do it. I'm not good at it. And then people are just never going to try again. I mean, I don't think that there's really a wrong way to do it. And it's a practice. It's not something like people would, for going back to the whole sports analogy, because that's so big in our culture, especially with children. It's like, put them in a sport and that's your thing. But it's like, you're not going to show up to a sport and just like expect to be amazing at it the first time.
Yeah.
Or you might. I'm kind of like that. If I'm not good at something the first time, I don't want to do it. Which,
my God, I'm a little bit different. I drill it until I'm good at it.
Okay.
Like I did with the meditation, I was shit. It was grueling. I mean, even now, it can be grueling. Yeah. But that's the thing is like, going about it, and there's a way of looking at the world in the way that I practice, and it's I'm going to do something to make all this stuff arise so that I learn to handle it before life foists it upon me, So yeah, like there's this practice of holding asanas or postures for long periods of time or whatever. There's different methods that people use to cause all of this stuff to come up inside of you.
Yeah.
At least in yogic traditions, so that you can deal with it before life puts you in a situation where you have to. And that's what a lot of it was, because ultimately you have to look at what's in there. I mean, there are methods where there are very powerful methods where you just follow the process and your things are dissolved, but you have to follow those to a T. There are other processes where it's not so clean. And I say that, because I don't really have a better word to use. You have to do the looking. It doesn't just dissolve. You have to do the looking, and you have to process it yourself, and so that's what I was doing. And I mean, it sounds romantic. Oh, I sat there and meditated for hours. It was god awful.
It sounds romantic to say that. Well, it also kind of doesn't, because
yeah, I mean, it sounds nice if you think of like some Buddhist monk or something who's just sitting there in the temple, just
I'm so peaceful all day.
Exactly. No, a lot of it was just absolutely bawling and screaming. Because literally, and then learning how, literally, you might think in some cases I was having an exorcism, and that's what it felt like, sometimes. Like it was, but I was like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And there's a lot that goes into this, there's biology, pathology, all these things, and we can get into all of them. But I'm only talking about that part that you have to deal with, regardless of what it is, whether it's illness, whether it's, or something, you have to look at what you're doing to yourself within the context of all of that. If you're sick, regardless of what is happening to your body, and I know this well from having my own experiences with illness, like real illness, not like, oh, I caught a cold, that, you have to look like, okay, I'm going through this, but what am I doing to myself on top of it? What part of this, what's my hand in this? Am I doing the best that I can with the card that I've been dealt? And am I making this worse for myself? I'm not touting that you're going to meditate and then heal like cancer or something, but you can certainly, or, gastritis, or I don't know, something, but you can certainly, the one thing you do have control over is how you view and operate, like in terms of your perspective and in terms of the actions that you take towards your own well-being and towards those around you. Because I'll tell you what, when I ended up getting really sick, I'll keep this short and sweet as best I can, because we know how good at that I am. But and I'll put it in the context of my own experience, because I don't want to impose on others or, speak from a place that I don't know. But I think it's applicable and can be translated. Yeah, like, when I went to India, I caught an infection from the water, and it didn't initially, it presented when I got back from to the US. And
when did you go to India? How old were you?
This is 2017. This was the year that you met Shane. And that's how I know how long it is that we've known each other.
So then you're 20, 19, 20? Just to put in perspective of...
I'm 26 now. It's 2024, 4, 6, 22 minus... Okay, yeah, so like 21 years old.
Okay.
No, 2017 I said, right?
Yeah.
So 3... Okay, yeah, like 19 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not supposed to do math in public.
Yeah, evidently I'm not. But yeah, so I went in 2017. I was 19 years old, and I got sick when I came back. I was so hard-headed about not using antibiotics or really any medication. I mean, I was fanatic. Mm-hmm. I was so set on it. I had been sent with an antibiotic just in case,
While you were there?
While I was there. Like I went and I had a prophylaxis for malaria too. That one I took, and some other stuff, but the prophylaxis for the malaria was the only thing I took. But I got back to the U.S. and I was like, I got super sick for like 3 days. I was like, I'm not going to take this antibiotic. Well, what they don't tell you about food poisoning, E. coli, or whatever is it can cause dysbiosis, which means it'll fuck you up long term. And so something was off, but I never quite knew what, and it wasn't enough for me to do anything about it. 2 years later, almost overnight, I got so sick. I got so sick. Well, what I mean by that is, first thing, I got these panic attacks. I mean, I had not had panic attacks since back in sophomore year was the last time I had a panic attack. So, mind you, this is 2 years after my trip. So now we're like 2019, and sophomore year was 2013. 2013, 2014. So this is literally like 7 years later after the fact. Apparently a lot of things are moving in sevens. If anybody wants to attach anything to that, I'm not going to, yeah, so I started having these panic attacks out of nowhere. And at this point, I am even keeled. Like, I do not have any emotional imbalance in me. And I mean, and I say that I'm like meaning it. Like, I worked hard for that. Like, and so when this started happening to me, I was up the wall about it. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And so I checked in with myself and I just observed what was happening. And I noticed it started in my body. And then when my mind couldn't figure out what was going on, it started reeling. And then emotionally, I kind of caught onto it, and it would evolve into this thing. And I mean, I was on the toilet like 24/7. I lost, and I was already pretty thin. I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. It was wretched. I became so weak, I could not sit up and meditate. That was the first time that I was without my practice, whatever it was at the time, without my sadhana, since I had started. So all of a sudden, my tools were wrenched from me. And it devolved very quickly. I mean, it was rough. And that's the thing, is like, it's easy to be wonderful when things are going great. The real test is when things are shit. Mm-hmm. And I very quickly became a pretty unpleasant person to be around. And it hurts me to say that because I worked hard. And then I was faced with this fact like, yeah, maybe I'm not so great. And it was real humbling because I had done all this work and I thought, oh, I'm invincible. And now as a 20-something-year-old, my body is ripped out from under me. You know, you're supposed to feel invincible at that age. You're supposed to feel like you can do anything and like your body will do literally anything you tell it to. And yeah, now all these ideas about what my 20s are going to be is, I literally had no idea if I was going to die. I didn't know if I had like colon cancer or this or that. It took 3 months of testing to find out what was going on. And then it found out, oh, I had SIBO, I had E. coli, yada, yada, yada. And I mean, I went through allergy testing. I went through like your regular blood testing. Came up I was pre-diabetic. Apparently, dysbiosis can cause that. Can cause a lot of, or contribute at least to a lot of chronic issues, which people don't realize. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever seen that gut documentary on Netflix that came out, but that's a great one, and they actually talk about it there. So,
no, I haven't.
If you or anybody's in, like, please watch that. Wow, we were talking the other day about, was that you with fecal transplants?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, like it goes into like definitely watch it. 10 out of 10 recommend. But yeah, so yeah, I just had to reprocess all of that, and then what is my life like? But that's what I was talking about. It's like in certain paths of yoga, you put yourself in a situation to prepare yourself before life foists it upon you.
Mm-hmm.
I never planned. I went to yoga thinking like to yoga. I went to India for yoga and like whatever. And of course, I get one of the biggest lessons of my life from it. And not in the pretty way, not in the romantic, oh, I visited temples and it was so transformative. And, I meditated on the side of a mountain and blah, 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 not all that crap.
The transformational lessons don't come that way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, and there's some people, I don't know how many, my guesstimate is that there's few of them, but there's some people who are simply blessed to learn things quickly, but I am a stubborn fucking nut. And sometimes, I mean, literally, it takes somebody to take a brick over my head to get the point across. And I think this was life saying, you've been arrogant enough. Here's, time to put you in your place. And, here's for being fanatical about not taking your antibiotics. Well, we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Like now I'm of the opinion, like, if you need it, just fucking take it. You don't have to live on it. Now looking back, if I could talk to myself then, I'd be like, take the fucking antibiotic, dude, because the amount of trouble that's come from it, not worth it. Not worth it. But I evidently, that was one of those things I just had to learn the lesson the hard way.
Yeah. Have you come to a place of gratitude with all of it for the journey that it's taken you on, even though it was fucked up?
Absolutely. But, I won't lie. Like, I still struggle with it a lot, you know? I mean, there's certain marks on my psyche that, like, I've been trying really hard to kind of scrub. And that's really what this whole trip was about, Like, I can feel that, like, I stopped at that place in time. And it breaks my heart. And the thing is, I know internally what it takes to fix that, at least for myself. And it's terrifying because, like I said before, you have to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to pretend it's not there. If I came to you and was saying, oh yeah, everything's sunshine and daisies now, that'd be a fucking lie. That would be such a spit in your face kind of thing to do, because that's not the case. I mean, and I didn't know this. I didn't know a lot of things before this happened, but apparently it's a thing that so I have something now called post-infectious IBS. So essentially, I have certain predispositions anyway that run in my family. But because of this infection, I've developed IBS because of the damage it did on my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working so painful. I mean, I've been on this elimination diet for 6 months now. This is the second time I've done an elimination diet. I'm not even going to get into why we're doing this a second time. Like, that's a whole thing. You think you're over it. Turns out you're not, type of thing. But it's a process, but for somebody who knows my body so well, now my mind it's hard because my body reacts the same way to everything.
Yeah, it's like a nervous system pattern.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's hard to tell, is it my mind doing it or is it my body? Because it's always like emotionally, I don't feel anxiety for initially. It goes straight into my body, but I don't feel the emotion of it. I just feel the physical symptoms of it, that parasympathetic response. You might get the runs, your heart goes, your blah, 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 but I don't feel an emotion. Yeah. My mind could be completely silent. It just goes straight into my body. And then it's like a PTSD, like my mind it literally just goes back to that place where all of this was happening. Like 3 months, I thought I was dying. I was a 21-year-old thinking I'm dying. Like literally, I could not drive for 3 months. I could not sit. I was bedridden. I was like, all this stuff was happening out of nowhere, it seemed. Obviously not out of nowhere, but it seemed like that to me. And I thought I'd been screwing up all sorts of like practices that I had been doing, like meditations and things like that, because I had little symptoms here and there. I would get like these little weird flare-ups in that 2 years between my India trip and when it blew up. And I thought, oh my God, like, am I screwing I was so relieved to find out that I wasn't. And that I actually had an infection that was doing this to me. Mm-hmm. But I was afraid to touch yoga for months after this happened because of how strong that feeling was that, oh my gosh, I've done something and I've screwed myself up now. When I came back to yoga, I just cried because I was like, oh my God, I have deprived myself of this for no reason. I mean, other than, it's funny too, because I relied so much on my body for the postures and this and that and the other thing. I could not sit up. I was too weak to sit up. Imagine, I do all this meditation and all this shit and whatnot. And so I went back to Yoga Nidra because you don't have to be sitting up for that. And I literally, oh my gosh, I felt like a toddler. I was like, I had to take it down to the bare, like, minimum, and it was a completely different kind of yoga for me. It was like, it was a completely different experience. But it was interesting because I don't think I'd ever been so spiritual. Yeah. I always found death and everything to be, I've always had an obsession with death. And I guess this might be a good place to segue into this topic, but some people might think it's a morbid obsession, but I don't think death is a morbid thing, and I don't mean to be insensitive.
I don't think that's insensitive.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I became very close with my mortality during that time. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I wasn't actually dying. I mean, we're all dying, at different rates. But I didn't know if I was or not. And here I am, a 21-year-old, and all of my ideas about whatever the fuck I thought my life was going to be out the window. And under a car. And everything that I loved doing, gardening and going outside, taking walks and visiting with people. And oh my gosh, I used to cook. So, I mean, you've experienced my cooking.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, I lost everything. But that's the thing, is they're all accessories to life, but it's not like life itself. And real spirituality, to me, in my understanding, is really understanding your mortality. Mm-hmm. Until you become personal personally acquainted with death and the concept of your own death, you will not know what it means to be spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
You will not understand the overwhelming magnificence of life until you really look at death. And this scares a lot of people. And I understand why. But if you want to know something more, you have to look at it. I don't mean go try it. That's not at all what I mean. But I mean, for instance, Buddha, he would have his monks, before somebody could become a monk, they had to sit at the cremation grounds for 3 months at least. They had to go and see, what is it going to be once you leave this place? What is going to happen after all that? You know, your body's going to get on a pyre. They're going to set it on fire. Your head might fall off halfway through the burn. Somebody's going to kick it back into the fire. You know, like, that's what it's going to be. There might be some nice rituals around it, yada, yada, yada. But that's what it is on a physical level, ultimately.
Yeah.
Is it will either go in the fire or go in the ground. I mean, and to understand that that can literally happen at any moment.
Yeah.
For anybody, you know, including yourself, most of all yourself. Like,
I think that's like unfathomable for a lot of people. And I know for like, I think there's so many different levels of, you know, being spiritual. And I think that well, I can just speak from my own perspective. I don't have to say like, oh, I think this happens to a lot of people. But at least for me, and I consider myself a very grounded person. I'm not really a spiritual person who's just always up there in the ethers and super esoteric and, you know, separated from like spirit and body. Like, I try to really be like living this experience of being an embodied spirit, and that means holding both of being high in the ethers and also very much rooted in the earth, you know.
mm-hmm.
But and I think it really stemmed from my studies on women's health and getting more into like holistic women's health and talking about how women are so cyclical and how we have our how we experience the 4 seasons throughout our cycle. And a lot of people equate the menstrual phase, like bleeding, as, you know, a death, and then you're reborn as the maiden and after you bleed. And so I thought I've this has been like a really recent revelation for me. And I've had some very close people to me die that have been like very transformational for my life. But I realized recently that I thought I was comfortable with death because I was getting so intimate with this like energetic death. Or, you know, a lot of people will relate more to like having an ego death. Like, oh yeah, I've had this many ego deaths. I'm comfortable with death. I know what it's like to die and be reborn. And it's seeing certain people die, either unexpected or expected. I think it's more the unexpected deaths that are really like, I don't know. I think I used this analogy before with one of my friends, but it's like almost like being a bird flying and then all of a sudden like a fucking boulder falls out of the sky and you just splat hit the ground. Like, it brings you back down to earth so quick. Someone being there and then being dead the next moment. And especially for me, like mothers, when a mother dies and out of nowhere and like leaves her children and her family, and this woman is like the center of the universe for that family, and then all of a sudden she's dead. Like, that is very, yeah, it's freaking splat on the ground. Like, you're bringing yourself back down to earth. And having a distant person, which is someone I went to school with, who was a mother and had 2 children, and she was just the center of that family and her community, and she died in a car accident. there was I don't need to go into details, and it's interesting that it was someone so distant, but then, over time, more people die. People are always dying. And I just have come to this realization recently that I'm not comfortable with death. Like, physical death is really scary to me, and it's really hard for me to, like, mentally understand. That's why I use the word unfathomable. And then thinking about, like, my own death. Yeah, it's not, I don't even know if it's something, like, it is something to think about, but it's also one of those things that's, like, not, I don't know if our brains can ever really make sense of it, just the way that we're wired. But yeah, I thought that I was like, oh, the birth, life, death, rebirth cycle. Like, I'm comfortable with death. I experience this every single month with my cycle. And in a way I do, and that's true. And I think that, like, energetic death is also something to be comfortable with, just the sense of letting go in general and not having to just fully hold on to everything so tight. But physical death is like the dying of the body. Yeah, I don't have words for it, but it's just so different. And I almost, like, want to put out a PSA to everyone who thinks they're, like, so comfortable with death. And I do think it is a different life experience when you do have those close. I don't know if close encounter is the right word, because it's like I'm not having these personal close encounters with death with my own life, but with people that I love very much, or just being people that are very close to me and very dear to me. To lose someone like that, I think if you don't experience that, or you don't experience that until later in life when everyone is experiencing that, I just think that can shape you in a much different way in your perspective and the way that you live your life, honestly. And it kind of comes back all to the whole sacred reclamation thing. And that is where my battery died and Hurricane Helene unfolded, as we all know how that story went. Tune in next week to hear part 2 of Steven's story that we recorded a few weeks ago in February of 2025. Endless gratitude and blessings to you all. Peace. See you next week.